Hey everybody, it's Shaman Sister Sin, and you're listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. Before we begin, I wanted to let you know that Understanding Narcissists, my most recent book, is available on Amazon and on my website. If you would like to get your copy, you can use the link in the information section of this video to do that. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something that is extremely common when dealing with narcissists, and that is the cult like narcissistic family structure. We've talked about cults here before, as there is often pathological narcissism operating in cult groups and settings. Some of the language we use to talk about pathological narcissism now was originally conceived of and used when talking about cults, such as love bombing. The cycle of narcissistic relationships often mirrors what we see in recruiting and assimilation into cults, and this makes perfect sense. A relationship with a narcissistic person could easily be described as a cult of two, where people are engaging in what's called a folie à deux, which means the madness of two, and engaging in a shared reality that does not necessarily match the objective reality, the actuality of the situation, a fantasy of the relationship and the people in it, including themselves. This view may extend beyond the relationship to include others or the outside world as well. This is the same thing that happens in a cult. The members of a cult are all engaging in a shared reality, one that may or may not reflect actuality. This shared reality may revolve around some type of belief or philosophy or some kind of devotion to a person or a thing, and it is often defined and controlled by one or two dominant personalities in the group. Both cults and relationships with narcissists operate much the same way. Love bombing and ego involvement are used to recruit people into the situation. Triangulation is used to create the idea in people that they are special or somehow different than everyone else, and or to demonize outsiders, detractors, and deserters. People who fall from grace are devalued and eventually discarded. In cults and in narcissistic relationships, smear campaigns are used against other people, and isolation tactics are very common. The flow of information to the followers and even interaction among them is often controlled, regulated, or monitored as much as possible. People who challenge the narrative, the fantasy, or the authority of the dominant personality are targeted, devalued, and eventually expelled or otherwise discarded. This is because once a narcissistic personality is able to achieve this kind of validation for their fantasy reality, once they are able to literally create it in real life and make it real in this way, the resentment they feel for any challenge or disruption to that fantasy is extreme, which is one of the reasons we often see violence in cult situations and in relationships that include narcissists. They view this as an attack and generally react as if they've been threatened in some very serious way. As we discussed in the episode of the show entitled Gaslighting by Narcissists is Different, reality itself is perceived as an aggression by narcissists. It's a threat to the tolerable reality that they've had to come up with in order to survive, which is why these situations are so often self-destructive. All narcissists have to do is just be cool and live their lives, but they can't do that because anything that does not support and validate their narrative, their fantasy, the tolerable reality that they've created, is a direct aggression against them that must be responded to. This includes reality itself. What does this look like in practical terms? Often it looks like picking fights with people, groups, communities, institutions, whatever, for no reason. As a very basic example, if Bobby thinks he's the best person in the land, but somebody else is also saying that too, and people believe that person, this means Bobby's fantasy narrative about reality is threatened. That person, who may not even know our hypothetical narcissist Bobby, has to be attacked, smeared, demonized, minimized, maybe even eliminated somehow. Otherwise, Bobby's fantasy cannot be validated as true. This sounds so stupid, and usually it is stupid when you see it play out in real life. In the true crime genre, for example, where the most extreme narcissistic reactions are commonly examined, you see these situations happen over and over and over. Literally, in so many of these situations, all the narcissist or the narcissists involved had to do was just let whatever it is go and live their lives, and everything would have been fine. But now people are dead, and people are hurt, and families are ruined, and people are in prison, and all these terrible things have happened, all because it seems that so many narcissists cannot just do that. They cannot just let it go and live their lives, and what we're talking about here is a big part of why. If the world does not support their fantasy narrative of themselves and reality in general, then the world is an enemy. In narcissistic family structures, what we often see mirrors the structure and function of a cult as well. There's often one dominant member of the family that everyone else defers to, fears, or indulges somehow. This person controls and defines the narrative for the entire group and controls members through fear, intimidation, toxic value systems, false martyrdom, or feigned altruism of some kind. Challenges to narratives are perceived as challenges to power, and they are not tolerated, nor are outside influences and narratives. When one member of the family goes astray somehow from the shared reality created and controlled by the dominant personality, they are demonized, tormented, or excommunicated, exactly as we so often see in cult structures. As in cult situations too, the dominant personality may not be the only narcissist in the family. In point of fact, they may not even be the most narcissistic person. They're just the most powerful, and part of how they retain that power is by controlling other more narcissistic or antisocial members. Just as we see in cults, this is usually done through either fear and intimidation of some kind, or by inspiring loyalty and devotion through triangulation, love bombing, and ego manipulation. It can also be done by creating the perception that the dominant personality is a victim who needs to be protected through financial manipulation, scapegoating others somehow, or in any other way that involves controlling the narrative and the information. Controlling the narrative and the information equates to controlling the perceived reality of the situation. As we've been discussing, this is paramount to pathologically narcissistic personalities. If you are trying to control reality, then you need to control what people believe. To do that, you have to control what information they're exposed to or mitigate it somehow. In truth, of course, narcissists cannot control actuality. Nobody can. Stuff just is what it is. What they can do is try to control the way things are perceived and what is known. Due to narcissists' own fragile relationship with reality, they probably figure this is enough. Just like in cults, in narcissistic family cult systems, part of how this is done is to demonize or expel people who do not uphold and validate the narrative. This accomplishes several things. It not only marginalizes and mitigates the outsider or the betrayer and whatever challenging or contradictory information they were bringing, which benefits the dominant personality who's trying to control the perception of themselves and the situation. It has the added effect of creating solidarity and unity among those who are not being scapegoated and smeared. The truth is, even if it's unconscious, most people are generally relieved when something like this happens to somebody and it's not them. We see this in bullying situations where people might not join in on the bullying, but they also don't do anything to stop it either. Nobody wants to be rejected or abandoned by the larger group. It's built into our biology for survival. That's why these tactics work so well. Narcissists in a cult type of environment take advantage of that fear and people's reaction to it, probably because narcissists know this fear very well themselves, being so dependent on the cooperation and the complicity of others as they are, not just for survival, but for definition and validation of their very reality. There's nothing these personalities fear more than being rejected, and they would therefore project that onto others as something that they fear also. In this case, they happen to be correct. It's not always correct, as many things narcissists fear are not exactly universal things that all people struggle with, but in this case it is. Triangulation of this kind creates a common enemy or a sort of bad guy poster child that the group can point to and say, don't be like this person's bad. It gives the still favored group members something they can use to curry more favor with the dominant personality, perhaps achieving an even more special position, or at the very least, reinforcing their current one. It's similar to what we see in the golden child scapegoat dynamic. The scapegoated child holds all of the narcissist's hated personal qualities or refuses to simply submit to the smothering, oppressive influence of the narcissistic parent, or both, and becomes a target for blatant abuse and torment. The golden child sees what's happening to the scapegoated child and wants to avoid that at all costs. The way to do that is to submit to the smothering influence and become aligned with the narcissistic parent or caregiver. It's a survival adaptation, and one that is often not really optional, as the narcissistic caregiver defines these roles for the children and essentially leaves them no choice. Many scapegoated children refuse to accept and carry the imagined negative characteristics that are being projected onto them by the parent and are therefore seen as problematic troublemakers, as disobedient, or as quote-unquote bad somehow. Others become scapegoats simply because they fight to retain their autonomy and their individuality, which causes the narcissistic parent to feel rejected by them. This very natural, normal phenomenon in children is punished by a narcissistic parent, often severely, and through extension of their power and influence over the rest of the family by every other member of the family cult system. Everyone dances to the dominant personality's tune. Once the children are adults, these roles often persist. The golden child may remain enmeshed with the parent to this same extreme degree, having had their own personality and identity stomped on or even stomped out and overtaken by the narcissistic parent. They sometimes become the stand-in for the narcissistic parent in family dynamics when the parent is not around or after the parent has passed on. The scapegoated child remains scapegoated as an adult, continuing to be blamed, shamed, or treated as if they are crazy and unstable. The roles simply play out as they always have, with everyone doing what they've been conditioned to do this entire time. These roles can switch at times or reverse, but they're always defined the same way in the family, regardless of who's playing them. One or both of these people may actually end up becoming narcissists themselves as adults, leading to even more toxicity in the family. Last year, we all didn't like Bobby. He was a troublemaker and a problem. Susie was the golden child, and Bobby was the scapegoat. This year, Susie did something that Mom doesn't like, so now we all like Bobby, and we all don't like Susie. Now, Bobby is the golden child, and Susie is the scapegoat. Grandma called to ask Susie how she could treat her own mother so terribly, and Uncle Billy had a talk with Susie's husband about how toxic Susie is. Aunt Lisa didn't buy Susie's kids any presents for Christmas this year. Nobody's going to the oldest child's graduation, and on and on and on. In these enmeshed family systems, the dynamics are akin to a totalitarian dictatorship, where everyone's thoughts, feelings, beliefs, choices, and whatever else must mirror and are controlled by the thoughts, feelings, beliefs, choices, whatever of one person. Anyone out of alignment with that is a problem and a betrayer, and that is how they are treated. These family systems also mirror cults in another way. In a cult, when people start to have doubts about the direction of the group or the philosophies that are being extended, they keep these doubts to themselves, at least for a while. They don't talk about it to other members, partly out of fear that it's not safe to do that, but also because they feel confusion, even shame and guilt for doubting. This is the reality they've all existed in for so long, and everywhere they turn, it's being reinforced. How can they doubt it? Everyone else believes, something must be wrong with them. This is the same thing we see in a family controlled by a dominant narcissistic personality, but it can be different in the sense that there are often not that many, quote, true believers in a narcissistic family structure. In a cult, there are usually many true believers. These are people who truly believe in the cult's message or prophecy or leader or whatever. It's not cynical, it's not driven by power or anything else. Their belief is pure and they are true zealots on that subject. They do not see what a doubter would see. In a family cult system, many of the members actually do know what the dominant personality is really like, and they do see what's happening to a degree. Not all of them, of course, and many do sincerely buy into the dominant personality's manipulations, but even with those people, we still commonly find that many of them realize this is a toxic or abusive situation. They might not understand the dynamics. They might not understand how harmful it actually really is, but they can see that what's happening is toxic or that it's not okay. They just don't rock the boat because it's easier that way. They don't want to go against the dominant personality, and they often feel like they can't. Many people in this situation have been shamed and conditioned with supposed family values that are actually toxic methods of control drummed into them by dominant narcissistic personalities. For example, that you can never walk away from family no matter how terrible that they are. Or you cannot disagree with your elders. You can't disobey your elders no matter how old you get, no matter how wrong they are, this kind of stuff. People feel beholden to these relationships and stuck in them, so it's just easier to go along with it because they can't get out of it. We hear it all the time. People say things like, well, but that's just how mom is. Or, yes, your father's hard to deal with, but you just need to be the bigger person in this situation. Why don't you make an effort to get along with your brother? For me, do it for me. You should talk to your sister. She needs you. These statements endeavor to minimize what is often horribly toxic or abusive behavior and create the narrative that exiting the relationship is not an option, or that people should continue to tolerate abusive and toxic behavior so that other people who are either not being mistreated or aren't willing to advocate for themselves can feel better about the situation. It's bogus, and it's all part of the fantasy created in these situations that there's a loving family here somewhere. People need to just stop rocking the boat and get with the program, then everything is going to be fine. This is all part of the narrative that the dominant narcissistic personalities in these situations create in order to maintain control. Narcissists fear rejection and abandonment. It's their biggest fear. So they very commonly try to engineer situations where it is believed to be wrong or even impossible for others to get away from them. Browbeating people with these toxic quote-unquote family values is one of the ways they do that. They might also attempt to create excessive dependence in other members of the family through manipulation of emotions or finances, or engineer situations where they themselves appear excessively dependent so that they cannot be abandoned. We often see this in cults as well, where people are required to forfeit all worldly goods or give all their money to the group so that they're dependent upon the group and, by extension, the dominant personality. It's also not uncommon in cults for the dominant personality to be sickly or appear to be frail or disabled in some way, so that they have to be taken care of. Essentially, people now feel trapped in the situation, and the constant conditioning with toxic dynamics masquerading as values or love only makes getting out even more difficult. Taking or otherwise controlling someone's money works well to keep them around. Making them believe that leaving the situation is wrong or bad works even better. If you can do that, you don't even have to take their money. This is what narcissists commonly do in these situations. In order for people to leave cults, we often hear that they must be deprogrammed. This means that whatever the cult taught them has to be unlearned and replaced with healthier, more realistic information. That is also what has to happen when people escape narcissistic family structures. They've often been conditioned with limited, toxic beliefs and values by people who are not even living in the same reality as everybody else. So this must be unlearned in order to truly escape and to recover. This is very difficult for people. It's hard to look at things that you've believed for your entire life and see them as potentially untrue. Many people are not willing to do that because it's too scary or it's just too difficult. Others are unable. The conditioning is just too deep. For example, this is what we see in many narcissistic personalities. They are too psychologically rigid and too emotionally fragile to be able to examine or address any of these things. If what they believe is not true, now what? Narcissists have a disproportionate fear of believing things that are not true or of being tricked somehow, likely because their ability to perceive and test reality is itself impaired. The thought that they could be wrong actually causes a majority of them to double down even more. It causes them to hold even more tightly to what they believe or that they're claiming, and the more proof there is that they are in fact wrong, the worse this gets, resulting in the truly insane, nonsensical arguments and paranoid accusations that we are all so familiar with. The fear and shame attached to thinking they could have been operating under a false reality, a wrong reality, this entire time is too much for narcissists. So they go with what they know, even if what they know is damaging, hurtful, harmful, dangerous, or otherwise just not working for them at all. For most of us, however, even though this is difficult, it can be done. It starts with examining your beliefs about yourself and the world around you to determine if they are really yours in the first place. Where did they come from? Why do you have them? Do they stand up to reality testing? Are they actually true? Are they working for you? Are there other ways that things could be looked at that are maybe more realistic, more helpful? In this way, people can start to address and curate their own thoughts and beliefs to make sure these are truly theirs and that they're not operating according to outdated or unhelpful conditioning. This is the first step in deprogramming yourself from the narcissistic family cult. I hope this cleared a few things up for you. As always, I look forward to your comments, questions, and suggestions, so please keep those coming. I take appointments online, over the phone, via text, via messenger, via email, and through Skype and Zoom for clients worldwide. So if you're interested in speaking with me one-on-one, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I teach workshops, seminars, classes, courses, and clinics throughout the year. So if you're interested in seeing what we're running this month, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that. I have several books available now for purchase. You can do that on littleshaman.org. And if you are interested in joining our support group with access to exclusive content, weekly support meetings, and more, you can visit littleshaman.org to do that as well. You've been listening to the Meditations and More podcast brought to you by Transrelational Healing and littleshaman.org. That's me, Little Shaman. May the Great Spirit bless you. Have a beautiful day.
If you've been struggling through dealing with or recovering from an unhealthy relationship with a narcissist or other toxic personality, the Little Shaman has a catalog of over 500 YouTube videos designed to support your journey from discovery to recovery. You can also find additional resources on the Little Shaman website, including tools, courses, workshops, a support group with weekly meetings, and one-on-one appointments with the Little Shaman that are open to clients worldwide. There's even an AI chatbot built and trained exclusively by the Little Shaman using her work that can answer questions 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. For more information, visit littleshaman.org. You can listen to The Little Shaman wherever you find your favorite podcasts.